Mr. Keane, welcome to Atlanta. You're a recent arrival.
Yeah.
Where had you been and what brought you here?
Well, I was in Charleston, South Carolina for the last 15 years.
Wow.
And I left because my boss there, Joe Riley, who was mayor, was retiring. So it was a good time to, go to another city. And luckily for me, Atlanta needed someone to do a similar thing that I was doing in Charleston, in Atlanta. So I talked with Mayor Reed and went through that process and was very privileged to get this job.
Any similarities between a city like Charleston, both the southern cities, and Atlanta, a little bigger, I imagine?
It's bigger. I mean, there are similarities. I mean, and I think kind of culturally, certainly to some degree, they're both of the South, and I like that. So it's interesting to go from a small city like Charleston, but that is so historic and so much interwoven into Southern history. I spent a lot of time on those kinds of things there, and then come to Atlanta, the capital city of the South.
And what challenges have you found? I mean, what has gripped you more when you first got here? I mean,
well, I think I'm used to working in an environment where the planning department and we are very involved in the growth and development of the city in a leadership way, and I have that interest in Atlanta and the city, really controlling the conversation about growth and development of Atlanta, and so that's a challenge,
you kind of orchestrate. You're kind of the architect of where we're going, how we're going to get there.
Should be, I think this department should be that, and we got to get capable of that and have the capacity to do that, and I think the citizens should expect that of us.
Where are we going? I mean, how is Atlanta developing? I mean, I've been here 30 years and I've seen it grow in different places, but what do you envision for this city?
Well, the thing that I'd like to do is determine how big we want Atlanta to be in terms of population and employment, and then design the city for that size. Rather than saying, okay, we're going to grow by this amount, and how do we accommodate that growth? Almost more like a passive way, to aggressively say this is the size city we want to be, and let's design ourselves for that. It's a different way of thinking about it, but we're a very small percentage of the region right now, Atlanta, like 8% of the region. That's a very small percentage if you look at other cities. New York City's like 35 to 37%. Most cities have more. If we were 20% of the region, we'd be at 1.1 million people. We're at 450,000 right now. The point is not to be big for big's sake. It's just that my feeling about it is that for Atlanta to be a better place to live in the future than it is today, we need a lot more people living here.
We do.
Well,
how are you handling traffic and the roads?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I think we're going to be in a transition point between, Atlanta's a city in America that is seen as a place where transportation was always going to be, you're going to drive and park near where you want to go. And that can't be the equation anymore, obviously. You can't keep building highways or widening highways. So it's going to be more and more important that for a city of 1.2 million or 1.5 million to be a better place to live than 450,000, a lot of people are going to have to get around other than driving, which can be more MARTA trips, expanded transit, more convenient, safe walking, bicycling, all kinds of other modes, which has a huge implication on how the city grows.
Do you see the electorate, the residents buying into that?
Well, we'll find out. I'll tell you this, this is a city that's interesting to me because I don't currently own a car, and I didn't need one in Charleston. When I came here, I thought, well, I'll get a car. Like everybody else, I might get 2 or 3.
But
I haven't done that yet. And recently I've started to think, I don't know that I should, because if I do, I will drive it.
Right.
Because it's going to be everybody does. You buy it and you're going to drive it. And I'm telling you that driving in Atlanta is a much worse experience than riding the train and the bus. My commute to and from my apartment on MARTA is very enjoyable. Driving in the city of Atlanta is not. And so I'm afraid if I buy one, I'm going to lose this part of my life that's really enjoyable, which is going back and forth to work or getting around, because the MARTA experience is a great one. That's the bottom line. It's just better from a lifestyle standpoint, quality of life, to not be driving, because it's so frustrating to drive. And unfortunately, it's going to be more and more frustrating to drive. So more and more people need the option of not driving.
And you're planning around that
will be the big issue. So we're just getting started on this, what we're kind of calling the city design project, which is this matter of saying how big a city do we want to be, and let's design Atlanta for that. And the public will be very involved in this. It'll be a hugely public process over the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months. So that's, and to me, that's this point of the city needs to control the conversation about growth and development in the city. Where do we want density? Where is it smart to have density? And not for density's sake, but because that's the kind of city we want to be. Where do we need to protect lower density in the neighborhoods, and where do we need more parks and green space? How does the city become more natural as it grows? Because for a city of 1.2 million to 1.5 million to be a better place to live, obviously, it's going to have all the amenities that go along with being in a city. A big part of this to me is downtown Atlanta. Downtown Atlanta has a very small population today.
Sure. It's a college campus now, isn't it?
Well, there's more students, you're right. I mean, living downtown from Georgia State, which is great. I mean, Georgia State's wonderful to have there and create that vibrancy, but there's a very small, otherwise, resident population. And for me, we should have 450,000 people living in downtown Atlanta alone. So how do you shift downtown to becoming really the center of the city from a resident population standpoint, employment, and that's a challenge, as you know. So, but that's part of what will be.
And it's ebbed and flowed over the years too. Yeah. Downtown was once vibrant.
It was the place to be.
Yeah. Speaking of a place to be, it's to the casual observer, one would think to live in Atlanta, the best booming North Side, Buckhead. Nothing happening development-wise, seemingly on the South Side. Are we a tale of two cities here?
Well, it's certainly not completely north and south, I don't think. There's good things happening on the South Side. The population on the west side of Atlanta in particular, mostly west and south, is way down. There's a lot less people living there than there was historically. And that can't be the case, I don't think, anymore. We need more and more people living there. The people that are there now, the smaller population that's still there and owns their property, we need to do two things, really. One is make sure that for those that want to stay there, there's nothing about what happens in terms of revitalization that pushes them out. If you want to stay on the west side, right, that's the fear, and that's why that has to be addressed first. If you want to move, that's up to you. But nothing about what happens here will require you to move. And put specific things in place to ensure displacement does not happen. That's number one.
Well, people fear they'll be priced out, that.
Well, that's what I mean. Deal with that issue.
Okay.
And then the second part of it is enable revitalization, but in a way that is very diverse. Part of the city design project is saying, for us to grow like that, for the city to be the fastest growing part of the region, we're going to have to attract people that would otherwise live in the suburbs.
True. That's true.
And how do you do, what are those things that we have to do in order to do that? Because those things are good for the people that live here anyway, and so we're going to get into a lot of very important issues, and we've got to make sure that as more people come to the city, it's not divided economically, that neighborhoods are diverse. As a west side develops, we've dealt with the displacement issue, and that as growth happens, it's diverse in terms of the price of housing, the availability of opportunities for business, it's small business, large stuff, that there's a great diversity. That's what makes a good urban neighborhood, and so we have to build that in.
Mr. Keane, but that takes more than just a notion. That's rarely happening.
It ain't easy.
Right.
Believe me, but I have to tell you what the aspiration is.
Right.
We got a tremendous amount of work to do in order to get there, and it's going to require everybody participate.
Is that by design? You have to design that. You have to cajole that. You have to orchestrate that. I mean, what's the magic in there?
Hopefully, there's some ingredients that we can be involved in that don't require. There'll be some regulations that are going to be necessary to help enable this. But ideally, it's then, obviously in a town like Atlanta or any American city, it's market driven. But we've got to put some protections in place to ensure that we kind of bake in that diversity that the market can then produce. So there's regulations that would be involved through the zoning and other measures the city has.
They're saying you got to go, but I want to talk just briefly about neighborhood planning units.
Yeah, sure.
How important are they now? There was a time, prior to you being here, of course, when they were impacted what happened here at City Hall.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to be that way now.
Yeah, I think they're critically important, and really in this design project I'm talking about, in that process, I think we need to give them the resources and refine the NPU system such that the NPUs really own this design. I mean, because really, it should be it will be the communities to implement. I mean, that's the idea with NPUs, is that they are very engaged in how the city's changing, and so I think they're critically important. I think the original intent of the NPUs was perfect and very important, not only in Atlanta but in terms of cities in America, as a way to involve the public in what's happening in the city. It's just we've got to go back and repair the system a little bit, I think. It's very important that everybody feel welcomed into the public process, every citizen, and that their experience with the public process is satisfying. And I think the NPU system has broken down in some ways that can be repaired, but so that they become more inclusive of everyone.
Instead of becoming fiefdoms of
Exactly. So they don't become a small group that's representing a large area just because of the way they're managed. And so this is completely about trying to repair and improve the NPU system that's so important to Atlanta.
They still get an ear here at City Hall? Do the council people listen to them?
Oh, very
Do you
much.
listen to them?
Oh, I think, there's no question, but that there's a lot of, attention given to what NPUs say. But I also think there's a tremendous amount of frustration over the inconsistency between the NPUs and, just the things that seem to have broken down to some degree in terms of involving more people in the NPU process.
And you want to see that change?
Yeah, absolutely.
Finally, we hear so much about the Beltline. Is that the trigger for Atlanta's development and growth? And will it go west side, north side, south side as well? Or is it right now it's Piedmont Park in that area?
Well, it's fascinating to me because the Beltline is this public realm project for me. Like the streets in Atlanta, a lot of them are very difficult. When you think of great cities, you tend to think of cities that have this great public realm, and it's largely their streets and their parks where all people can come together. And Atlanta hasn't had that as much. And I feel like people are coalescing around the Beltline as that. Now we have a public realm that we can be proud of and enjoy and share. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be more and more successful. But we need to extend that to the whole city. That's what this design project is about. Let's take the Beltline as one of those framework, public realm investments for us, but how do we expand it and connect it and make sure everybody in the community is benefiting from, things like beauty and nature and all those kind of things matter to most people, and so it needs to be something that extends to the whole city.
So finally you see Atlanta growing in grace, or do you have some difficult days ahead?
I think we have some difficult, I think we'll have difficult days ahead in terms of trying to get consensus around how the city grows. Because any community, struggles with that. So Atlanta's going to struggle with that. And we've had a certain pattern historically over the previous decades that really needs to shift now. And that's a challenge for people. But I think it's going to be, I think that the process has to be fun and engaging for people.
So we're looking at a new Atlanta coming our way.
Well, I think hopefully, not a new Atlanta as much as, a much bigger Atlanta that's a better place to live in than the one we have today.